Hello, welcome to this computing web seminar on IT for the Agile organisation. My name's Brian Glick, I'm the editor of Computing. I'm going to be your host for this live interactive video web seminar. It's going to take about the next 60 minutes or so. Now, before we get into talking a little bit about the content, and before I introduce you to our expert panellists today, I just want to take you through a few little points of housekeeping just to explain to you a little bit about the screen that you can see in front of you and to help you to make the most of the time that you spend with us during the seminar. Now you'll see along the top of the screen that you're looking at, there's a number of tabs. The first one alongside the slides tab says questions. If you click on that, you'll see that there's a box there in which to type in any questions you may have and a button underneath that to submit those questions through to us. Towards the end of the web seminar, we'll have about 15 or 20 minutes when you get an opportunity to put your questions to our expert panels. It could be about a particular issue that you're facing in your organisation, or maybe it might be about something that you hear from our speakers today during their presentations. But you can put those questions in at any time. Just put those in, they'll all come through to me on the laptop here, and I'll put as many of those to our panellists later on as we can. You'll also see there's a tab there that says poll questions. And as we go through the event today, we're going to invite you to take part in a series of interactive poll questions. Now we find these particularly useful for a couple of reasons. Firstly, our panellists find them useful as a means of gauging the views and opinions of the people that are watching them speak. But in particular, we're told that viewers find them a really useful way as well of benchmarking their own views against those of their peers who are also watching today. So I hope you will take part in those as we come to those, and I'll come to the first of those very shortly. Next tab, you'll see there's a biographies tab. If you want to find out a little bit more about the speakers today, then you can read their biographies in there. And then alongside that, there's the help tab. If you get any technical problems, if you can't see or hear us for any reason, then click onto that tab and that will take you through a quick routine just to make sure that your PC is set up in the right way to be able to watch us today. Okay, that's all for the housekeeping then. Let's get on with the web seminar. Now, we're here today to talk about IT for the Agile organisation. Now, as the downturn has proved, those organisations that are able to respond quickly to changes in the market or the wider business environment are more likely to be able to survive and to thrive as we come out of the recession. Equally, those with the flexibility and the agility to respond when the economy improves will be the most prepared to succeed. Now, in this web seminar, we're going to look at some of the tools, technologies and best practices that goes towards making up an agile IT strategy. Now, to help us do that, we've got three excellent speakers, real experts in the subject today. First of all, shortly you'll hear from Neil Dutton. Neil is the research director of the analyst firm MWD Advisors, and Neil's going to be giving you an introduction to some of the key issues for IT managers in this area. After that, you'll hear from Gareth Evans. Gareth is the Insight Programme Director at Oracle UK, and Gareth's going to be looking at some of the best practice in tackling some of the challenges around Agile IT and really giving you a view of some of the experience that Oracle's customers have had around that. Thirdly, you'll have Barry O'Reilly. Barry is the Director of BPM Solutions at Oracle in Europe. And Barry's going to be having a look at some of the implementation issues around putting some of those practices into action. Now, before we get onto the first of those presentations, I mentioned to you earlier that we invite you to take part in a series of poll questions. The first of those now is live. If you click onto the poll questions tab on the console in front of you, you'll see that there's a question and 6 multiple choice answers there. All you need to do is select whichever one of those is the most appropriate to your organisation. The first question that we're asking you is what do you consider to be the biggest barrier to making your IT more agile? You'll see there are 6 alternative questions there. Perhaps you feel that the lack of senior management buy-in is a big problem for you. Perhaps you feel there is a limited understanding of what the available technology can do for you. Perhaps you feel there's a lack of appropriate skills or resources in your organisation. Maybe the problem is to do with your legacy systems and they don't adequately support being as agile as you'd like. Perhaps it's a cost issue. Or perhaps it's something else. And if you do click on something else as your answer, then maybe whatever that something else might be an interesting topic to put to our presenters as a question for later on as well. You can put your answers into that poll at any time during our first speaker, and after you've heard from him, I'll feed back to you the results of that. So without further ado, let's get on with the presentations then. Your first speaker, as I mentioned earlier on, is Neil Dutton from the analyst firm MWD Advisors. Neil, over to you.
Thanks very much, Brian. All right, so let's get started. I think it was Warren Buffett who said that when the tide goes out, you can see who's not wearing a swimming costume. When we're in good times, it's easy to actually deliver good corporate performance, or relatively easy, even if you haven't got all your ducks kind of lined up. But when things get tougher, it's really important to have an IT landscape and real estate and people who can really work together to support the kinds of changes that a business often needs to make. And what I want to do in this session is just dive a little into a few of the things that we see people doing and the way they can be combined to deliver business value that's quite often needed in the current environment. And also, as we move out of the current constrained environment into a recovery, which is bound to come sooner or later. So let's get started. I've actually been presenting this slide for quite a while, although the graphics have got nicer as I've done it. And periodically I think, well, maybe I should stop showing it, but actually it's still true, and I suspect it'll be true for some time. There are three things really that affect, it seems, all organizations, large and small, across industries, across geographies. And I think even in the current environment, where we're all finding things quite difficult, a lot of that difficulty is about the three things you can see here on this chart. I won't go through them in a lot of detail, but at a high level at least, globalization, particularly from a competitive perspective, is really a massive influence on all organizations. The fact that not only customers and partners and suppliers, but competition can come from anywhere, really. The requirements to be more transparent in the way the business operates, those are becoming ever more onerous, and partly because of the current economic situation we find ourselves in. But this isn't just about regulation. It's also increasingly about voluntary initiatives that organizations undergo. So corporate social responsibility programs, for example, green business programs. These things are really about instrumenting an enterprise and making it much more transparent to the outside world. And that clearly has major implications for how technology needs to support the way the business works. Because to be transparent, you need to be able to record things and demonstrate things. And that, of course, relies on information technology. And the third thing that we see absolutely all organizations still grappling with is how to deal with marketplaces where consumers, whether they're individuals or businesses, are increasingly smart and connected, where it's an awful lot easier to compare products and offerings, and it's an awful lot easier now to switch between suppliers as well and change relationships in quite a rapid fashion. All of these things add together to create complicated environments and new requirements really for IT in support of business value. When all this comes together, we see lots of different kinds of initiatives going on, but in many cases, regardless of industry, actually, they map onto a common set of things, and you can see them, hopefully you can see them in a kind of pinkish box near the top of this slide. Things like, for example, consolidating systems to deliver effective multi-channel experiences for customers. Things like making the business more demand-driven, so much more reactive to customer demand and much more able, in some cases, to predict customer demand, to support mergers and acquisitions and so on. Really what we see is that increasingly business teams need some parts of their activity to change direction rapidly, not all, and I'll dig into that point a little more in a sec. Of course, they need cost-effective delivery of value from IT investment. They also are looking, we're finding, they're looking for more flexible business models and footprints. So they're looking to be able to make much more granular decisions about how things get done and where they get done and by whom. And they're looking for support from IT to make those decisions more quickly and in a more granular fashion. And they're also looking for IT to help them look for innovation in more places. So rather than having a targeted team looking at R&D, for example, looking at ways to involve employees and even customers and partners and suppliers and other agencies in actually improving the business. At the same time, we're finding IT actually realizes there's a response that's required here. And we're finding, as I'll explain a bit more in a second, that the scope of IT concerns is really exploding from being about individual systems to being about entire ecosystems and business value chains. So it's a very, very fast evolving landscape, even in the current environment where we are constrained economically. There are lots of large scale pressures driving the need to kind of reappraise the relationship between business and IT and really create a new kind of engagement that allows IT people and IT tools and business people and business tools to really work much more collaboratively. And that's really the thrust of what I'm talking about today. Now, on this slide, what I'm trying to show is really that quite often you hear people talk about innovation or efficiency in terms of being the important drivers for IT investment and drivers for IT value. But what we're finding in all of our case study work and our research work is really that you can't have one without the other. Certainly, an innovation agenda is going to founder without an efficiency agenda. Quite often when you hear people talking about, from an IT perspective, the need to reduce spending on keeping the lights on, to make more spending available for innovation or differentiation, it's often described really as a kind of moving the deck chairs around kind of exercise, really reducing an amount of money you spend in one area to give you more money to spend in another. But what we find quite categorically is that it's not simply a matter of just diverting spending. What organizations have to go through is a coordinated set of exercises to reduce spending in more of a strategic way. So it's not just about cutting funding for things, it's about standardizing, it's about consolidating, it's about rationalizing, and it's really also about managing portfolios more effectively. And it's only really by doing that with an existing IT landscape, looking to standardize and consolidate and really create the right kind of business platform from those IT investments that you can then do innovation on top. As I've said at the bottom of the slide here, if you don't know where you are, then it's difficult to know where you can go next. If your systems can't tell you who the most profitable customers are, if they can't give you a single view of a customer or a single view of a bill of materials or drive any of those really important decisions that are about those key information assets like the customer base or sets of products, those kinds of things, then really innovation is just going to get you lost very, very quickly. So as you quite often see from other commentators, these exhortations to reduce the amount of spending on keeping the business running, this really has to be about creating a business platform, a very clearly structured and consistent business platform that is structured around particular kinds of business assets. So it's not just simply a matter of moving money around. And that's really why I think that even in difficult times, there needs to be a consistent thread of IT strategy running through organizations. Now, what I've tried to show here is that this set of presentations here is really all about agility, but it's very easy to think of agility in one dimension. And what I'm really trying to show here is that not everything needs to be agile in the same way. This is a kind of a cartoon, really, of what you might call a capability map or a domain map of an organization, where you've got different levels of activity, from the kind of day-to-day execution up to a management level, up to strategy setting level. And then going across, you've got sort of different lines of business, if you like, or different capability areas. And what we find in the work we do advising clients around IT governance and architecture is that there are some domains where actually you need to optimize for flexibility, absolutely. But there are others where you don't want to do that. Actually, you really want to optimize for industry best practice. What you want to do is do what everyone else is doing for as little cost as possible. You don't really want to be different. And that's a key realization. But what's also very important is to realize that how those equations might be solved today, how you might look to optimize certain domains today, might be very different to how you want to optimize those things next year. So there are multiple levels at which you actually might want to look at this and look at the concept of agility. Just to quickly give an example of what I'm talking about here. If you think about loyalty programs in retail, if you go back about a decade or so, retailers used to keep a lot of customer buying data, you know, what people bought at the checkouts and so on. But they didn't really do very much with it. It was something that they had to do, but the analysis of that was pretty patchy. And then one supermarket had the great idea of actually having a loyalty card program and analyzing data based on previous buying patterns. All of a sudden, an activity that which previously had to be optimized for cost is now a differentiating activity. It has to be optimized in a very different way. So agility is very important to consider from a couple of perspectives. This chart really just shows how in different parts of a business you need to optimize in different ways. And we're clearly seeing a shift away from back office execution processes towards how can we deliver more structured IT support for management and strategy setting processes, typically those things that are at the edge of the enterprise, those processes where people, where organizations interact with customers, partners, suppliers. So we are overall moving to an environment where IT needs to be more flexible and more agile. So although there are these different ways of solving the equation of how IT supports business, overall there's a definite trend towards needing to be more flexible in how we deliver IT solutions. And I just, at this point, want to quickly introduce a couple of those business tools that we see can really play a role here. And the other presenters will go into these in more detail. But just to quickly say, you know, BPM is something we hear a lot about. I really do see this as a business tool. It absolutely requires a lot of IT involvement to drive the value. But fundamentally, it's a business change tool about really getting more structured ways of working, getting more standardized ways of working, and also creating a kind of platform where business can be more agile and drive change more effectively and more globally. SOA is a key support for that, service-oriented architecture. And not only in support of flexibility, but also in support of situations where you really actually need predictability. People often talk about service-oriented architecture in support of flexible IT, but actually it's also very valuable, particularly once you get a couple of steps into a SOA implementation program. It's very, very valuable in driving predictability through the reuse you can gain. If you have a key set of services that you can use again and again in different scenarios, that actually drives time to market, drives predictability, and it drives quality of solution. The third piece, which we probably won't go into so much today, is around event processing, which is really about a set of technologies very complementary to BPM and SOA that enable an organization to sense and respond much more effectively and consistently in response to changing environments. And it's clear, to me anyway, that BPM and SOA don't just deliver value in one dimension or at one level. Particularly in the current environment, it's very natural to think of BPM and SOA as being about operational efficiency and really driving purely from an efficiency perspective. And clearly there's value there, you know, in terms of standardizing processes, standardizing integrations, improving the consistency of integration with back-end systems and reducing costs of managing those things, and so on. That's very valuable. But I think it's important to realize, particularly as we look to the future, to an environment which is bound to actually create opportunity in the medium term, we start to move into a recovery phase economically. I think it's really important to think about how BPM and SOA can deliver value on top of that operational efficiency piece. And really, here it's valuable to think about products and service innovation. So how, really just echoing back to the slide I presented a few minutes ago, about creating that platform for innovation. BPM and SOA can really do that for you. They can create an environment on which it's much easier to create new products, to combine new products and services in new ways, and even to support differentiation based on service levels in ways you may not have been able to before. So actually be able to differentiate in a market by really making very concrete promises about how quickly your company can do things, for example. Without a good handle on process and process efficiency, you can't really do that. Once you've got that base in place, you start to create new tools for the business to use to differentiate in new ways. And lastly, at the very top, these things also can create a platform for business model flexibility, where it's possible to be much more flexible and smart about how you outsource key capabilities. If you can get more structure into the way the business works in key areas, then it's much more manageable from a risk perspective to be able to start to give those things to partners to help you out with. So there's multiple layers of value here. And the thing that's off to the side that's really important to remember is as well that BPM and SOA can also together create a fantastic collaborative environment. And we find where this works well, a collaborative environment, also a common language between IT and business. That's the end of my part of the presentation. Thanks very much, and over to you, Brian.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that, Neil.